Ticky, one expert says Australia has a de facto carbon price, yet the Australian people at multiple elections now, they have rejected carbon pricing. So how has it happened that big business have done it anyway and they've denied our democracy?
Well, look, as you know better than most, Peter, we've lost, 4 prime ministers, is it now, over this issue? It is an issue that has split both parties at the moment, the issue of coal in particular as it relates to carbon. And I think the idea of a carbon price at the moment in Australia is in a way coming in by stealth. And by the way, I think the Morrison government and Angus Taylor is not stopping that from happening with this carbon offset that is actually going on. To your point about the ESG pressures, the environment pressures, particularly from activist shareholders, this is something that is coming right around the world at the moment. And that is what is causing business to blink on this subject. What makes me really angry is that the companies who are in coal at the moment are the ones that are going to have to do the incredibly hard work to transition. So, for example, you've got AGL the other day that split itself into 2 companies, a good company, which is all new generation, and a bad company, which is going to be dealing with the coal-fired power stations. Now, at the moment, Australia still gets 70% of electricity from coal-fired power. And this is a transition that is going to happen, but it's not going to happen overnight. And we should be supporting these companies who are in coal to transition properly, and they need funding. And it's no good for banks to walk away from this because actually they're just passing the buck, Peter. They're not actually funding and helping the transition.
Yeah, we're just on the point of coal in Australia and ESG pressure, activist pressure on companies. Of course, coal that's dug out of the ground in Australia and the type of coal that we use is pretty amazing in terms of its environmental impact compared to coal from Mongolia, coal from Indonesia, coal out of Africa, and the mining practices in those countries too. The activists aren't targeting necessarily those companies. They're targeting companies in first world economies like Australia. This is where, you might win out in a fight in Australia, in the politics of Australia, but in terms of the global emissions fight that they say that they're invested in, I'm not so sure, but they say they are, that they're globally, it's not working for them.
Well, it's very funny you should mention that because the other day BHP was under pressure to sell down some of its coal assets. And who bought them? The giant trading company Glencore, which is a public listed company globally. But Ivan Glassenberg, who was the head of Glencore, once he bought the assets, he made a bit of a sort of carp at BHP and said, look, it's all very well, chaps, but you are literally just passing the buck here because we are going to have to deal with this issue. And we should be dealing with it responsibly. And to your point, we do have some very good quality thermal coal in this country. We also have some less good quality, but some of our really good quality thermal coal and our metallurgical coal, which is absolutely critical to make steel anywhere in this world, is a really important export. And like so many things, you can export a problem, but very often you'll find that people in the first world do things, as you say, to higher standards because they can, because they've got the money behind them.
I can't not ask you a question, given you are a Brit now in Australia, probably Australian too, Ticky, but these extraordinary pictures we're getting out of Wembley, Trafalgar Square, we saw the Tour de France, we've obviously seen Wimbledon. We're locking down. The rest of the world is opening up. They're not even out of the worst of it in Britain. They're not at their famous Freedom Day. That's still a little bit off, but it doesn't look like they've got any constraints. In fact, they've got more freedom, I have to say, than we have here. We're in Fortress Australia mentality. How much is this going to cost us if we don't get this right and get out of it as soon as we can?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to cost us a little bit, but I reckon we're going to be out. The pressure will be on. We're going to be out before mid next year. I reckon these vaccines are going to be ramped up And I reckon it is countries like Britain with that sort of decision that they're making now, which is going to push other countries around the world. And as you've seen, recovery coming faster, bounce back coming, everything's going to happen faster, and we will be forced to reconnect with the world faster than mid next year.
Do you think we'll see the end of lockdowns in Australia?
I do. Yeah, I do. And I think Gladys Berejiklian is really pushing that. But I think this percentage about the idea that 80% needs to be vaccinated before we actually open up and don't do any more lockdowns, I think that number is going to come down.